Guys, it's getting that time of year, man. It is that time of year where college football, you are starting to find out who the pretenders are and who the contenders are. And guys, LSU obviously coming off of their best game of the season, they get a huge win. A huge win. Don't let the Arkansas stuff and the whole they're not good, they lost to USC narrative. Don't let that into your brain because it's just fake news right now. All right, because this LSU team is playing its best football that it's played all season, including the last game, which was their best game for all four quarters on all sides of the ball. And it's not even up for debate. If you're looking at the Power 5 opponents they played and how they played against them, this was clearly hands down the best one they played. Even against Ole Miss, they messed up certain things. They weren't efficiently moving the ball offensively in the first half, right? They did some things here and there that made you scratch your head. They turned the ball over. All of these things being said, they still found a way to win that game, which led you into the Arkansas game and a really tough situation for LSU because everybody went in this game like this is the trap game, all right? LSU finally thinks they're good. They're not good, right? Because they lost to USC. That's the narrative out there. And they played a close game against South Carolina. They played close games against other teams that they were supposed to beat. They give up a ton of yards to people, like whatever, right? But LSU found a way, and not only did they just find a way, they went on the road to Arkansas and just absolutely dominated the football game. The game was never in question, and now you turn your attention to Texas A&M, right? A Texas A&M team that is very eerily similar to you, right? Lost the season opener against a very good quality opponent in Notre Dame. They go and rattle off six straight, right? And so now this sets up a monumental matchup in the SEC between the only two undefeated teams left. I don't think anybody had that on their bingo cards was Texas A&M LSU being the last remaining unbeatens in the SEC. But this weekend, that's what we got. And LSU goes to College Station. And this is a game that I put a lot of emphasis on earlier in the season because I thought it would determine what your ceiling would be as a football team. Because this is a place in Kyle Field that you have not won in since 2016. You guys probably remember all of them, right? 2018, 7 overtimes. 2020, that year doesn't even, I don't even want to talk about that year. 2022, you go in there as a top 10 team, you lose, right? 2024 sets up for a monumental game here in the SEC, the biggest game of the weekend on the SEC slate for sure. You have the primetime 7:30 game. That place is going to be rocking, as it always is. LSU, Texas A&M have, unfortunately, I hate to say this, become rivals over the last few years. And it's been a back and forth series. A&M hasn't won in Baton Rouge, and LSU hasn't won in Kyle Field since 2016. So the home team has dominated the last couple years, and LSU is going to have their hands full. We're going to break down the entirety of the game. We're going to talk about what LSU season looks like now. Are they going to be playoff contenders? We're going to break it all down here. But we're going to start with the football game first, right? Because, like I said, this is a huge football game, and a game I had LSU losing preseason on my list. We'll make our prediction towards the end of this show, but you have this LSU football team. We're going to talk about it from the LSU side a little bit here. You're coming in at the highest point you could possibly come into in your season, right? If you wanted to pick a high point in the season so far through 7 games, obviously the Arkansas was that football game, right? The Ole Miss win was great, but like I said earlier, you had flaws, you had mistakes, you did things wrong in that football game, and against Arkansas you didn't. Like, you were able to do pretty much everything you wanted to do, and the most impressive thing about the Arkansas game was the fact that you held that rushing offense that almost averaged 200 yards per game. You held them to 38 yards rushing, which nobody's done this year, right? LSU hasn't done it this year, and we talked about it. LSU's run defense is good, all right? Where they struggle, they give up the huge play, right? You go and look against South Carolina, you give up a 75-yard touchdown run to Lenora Sellers, you give up a 65-yard touchdown to Rocket Sanders, and they didn't run the ball other than that. You go and look at the UCLA game, you have a couple big runs in that one. You have the big run to Nichols to open up the half that scores a touchdown, 60 plus yards. You have the Ole Miss game. You have the 4th and 1 where you give up 40, 55 yards, something like that, on Ole Miss and give up a touchdown. So it had been the story coming in, and that was completely shut down. LSU's game plan in this thing was absolutely perfect. They were able to neutralize Taylor Green's legs a lot in that football game, and this LSU defense is playing with confidence. And it all starts and ends with Whit Weeks, because the last 2 weeks with Harold Perkins being out, Whit Weeks has stepped up and more into that role and become the best player on this defense, right? You have guys like Braden Swinson, you have guys like Savion Jones that are causing havoc, and you have even guys like Zy Alexander stepping up and becoming good corners who are giving you stability at a position you desperately needed. And even a guy like Greg Penn, who's just been slow and steady and doing his job and goes under the radar, but he does his job. He forced a huge fumble early in that football game to kind of get Arkansas out of that football game. So I don't want to just focus on Whit Weeks, but over the last 2 weeks, he's been the best defensive player in the SEC. And he's just creating plays. He's just going out there and playing football. And you can tell that the biggest difference between last year and this year is the disconnect from the defensive coordinator. Like, these guys go out there and they want to play for Blake Baker. Like, last year, they didn't want to play for Matt House. It's not, we've heard all week, and we heard Brian Kelly talk about it. It was never about X's and O's. It's about the relationships. It's about getting to know your players and having them want to play with you. Obviously, Blake Baker's great at the X's and O's too, but you have to have that personability with the player, and that is shown more than ever, because Blake Baker's proved that he's worth every single penny that LSU paid him this offseason, and everybody has already said it. If not, it's the fact. LSU wins the national championship last year with this defense and this coaching staff. Whichever personnel you wanted to choose with this coaching staff this year, that LSU team last year wins the national championship, because offensively you weren't able to be stopped by anybody. Defensively, I mean, you lost the game to Ole Miss, you scored 49 points in. So it doesn't get much worse than that, right? Now, from the A&M perspective, right, you're kind of in a situation where there's still a lot of unknowns with A&M. Believe it or not, playing 7 games, you had earlier in this year where Connor Wigman got hurt. You were rolling the backup out there. You were winning. You were winning consistently, and you were winning in good ways. And now Connor Wigman is back. You're still winning. It just looks a little different, right? I know a lot of you guys saw that Connor Wigman had one of the lowest PFF grades of any quarterback in the SEC last week in a win against Mississippi State, where they didn't look tremendously great. That game was a 7-point game going into the fourth quarter. Like, it was not some blowout game. No matter, I don't even know what the final score ended up being, but this is not an A&M team that's like going out there and, slinging around, looking great offensively. This team is going to be exactly what you think they are. They're going to run the football. They're going to play extremely good defense. And the reason why I thought preseason that this game would have one of the biggest concerns for LSU is the defensive factor, because I think in the secondary, A&M can match up with LSU's receivers. And obviously, LSU has struggled to run the ball. And I wouldn't take too much into account, just like I don't take too much into account with LSU's defense. I wouldn't take too much into account the fact that they were able to run the ball pretty consistently against Arkansas, because I don't see that being like a sustained thing. Now, hopefully they go out there and prove me wrong, and they can run the ball, they can throw the ball, they can do whatever they want this weekend, right? Just think it through a realistic lens here. Based off what I've seen throughout the whole entirety of the season, I'm not expecting LSU to go out there and run for 200 yards on Saturday night and dominate the game and time possession and all that kind of stuff. Like, this Texas A&M offense is very reliant on the run game. They run the ball percentage-wise probably more than anybody in the country. This game is purely going to come down to who can make that big play, right? Who can get that one turnover, who can get that one play that changes the entirety of the football game, because it's going to be a close game. It's been a close game against A&M for years now, where these two teams are very competitive. They're jockeying for position, and now you have it all on the line, right? The winner of this football game puts themselves into a tier where they are no longer candidates to be in the college football player, but they are going to be favorites to be in the college football playoff. And you really set yourself up. I'm obviously A&M schedule is a little bit more backloaded, just like LSU's kind of is middle loaded. But if you're looking from the LSU perspective, right, you win this football game, it almost catapults you into a realm of like, can you get through the season with just maybe one more loss or no losses? Perfect, right? It would guarantee you're in, but you go and you maybe only, let's say you lose to Alabama next week, like your playoff hopes are still alive, because if you get in the SEC championship as a one-loss team, like you're still right in the thick of things. And I don't think this year they're going to punish people for making the college or the conference championship games and losing, maybe giving them a third loss. I don't think they're going to punish people for that, because that would be stupid. Because then what would be the point of playing a conference championship game if they would have just been in before and then lose and then now they're not in? So everybody got to stay home and they get in, but you had to play and you're out. So I don't know how that's going to work, but that's the bigger picture of this thing. But as A&M is looking at it the same way, right? They have the same exact opportunities that LSU has in front of them, and believe me, they want to beat you just as bad as you want to beat them, because as much as I don't want to admit it, this is a rivalry. Like I can't stand A&M. They can't stand us. They're weird. They do dumb stuff. It's creepy. They have male cheerleaders. Like, we know, like, they're goobs. Like, I don't know how else to say it. They're weird. It would make me give me no more pleasure than going into their building and beating them and ruining their season, because I feel like that's what would happen. Because A&M, I'm not as high as A&M as I am on LSU right now, which is leading me to my prediction segment, where I just think LSU is coming into this football game playing too consistently on both sides of the ball. I think they have found their stride. I think they're playing their best football. Now, I could be completely wrong, guys, and I hope I'm not, but I think LSU wins this football game, and I'm going to tell you why, and it's because they have Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier is the ultimate equalizer, and it's the reason why I picked him in the majority of these games, because it's become apparent that Garrett Nussmeier is one of the top quarterbacks, not only in the SEC, but in the nation, right? If you could trade him for anybody, you probably wouldn't trade him for maybe 2 or 3 guys. Like, that's how good he has been this season. And Connor Wigman versus Garrett Nussmeier, I know they don't ever see each other on the field, but that's what it comes down to. And I think Connor Wigman is not going to make as many plays as Garrett Nussmeier and company on offense. I just think that maybe A&M stops LSU for a little bit there, but LSU's proven against a good team like Ole Miss. Ole Miss's defense is just as comparable to A&M. A&M is just a little bit better in the secondary, but Ole Miss is way better up front. And the offensive line has proven they can handle any challenge you throw at them. So those pass rushers, Nick Scorton and company for A&M, they're be coming after them. But we got Will Campbell and Emory Jones, and I got LSU winning this football game. I got it being a little bit lower scoring game. I'm going to say it's going to be 28-24. LSU pulls it out. Maybe A&M has the ball last, driving down the field. LSU forces the game to end and maybe gets a big turnover late. But I think LSU takes this one 28-24 and absolutely propels themselves into college football playoff talk. And it's going to be nonstop, and it is going to be absolute chaos. If LSU wins this football game, it is going to be absolute nonsense when Alabama comes to town, because, guys, we've waited a long time for Nick Saban to retire, and Alabama got some reparations to pay. And let's just say if LSU wins this football game, the confidence is going to be at an all-time high, and Baton Rouge is going to be rocking. So I hope you guys have a blessed rest of your week, man. Thank you guys for watching this breakdown, and make sure you guys keep checking out our stuff. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. It's completely free. It costs you absolutely nothing. All it does is help us out and, gets more exposure to the channel so we can keep doing things like this. So I will see you guys next week when we break down the A&M game and lead into the bye week. We will kind of do a season kind of recap of what's happened already, where I think LSU's going. We're going to be talking about it all. So, like I said, thank you guys, and thank you guys for watching.